It is better to suffer injustice than to commit it. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A principle so simple that any one of us could apply it in his own life. And yet, if someone humiliates you, crushes you, takes away everything you love, would you really be able to stay just, to not fight back? What even is justice? And how can you be just when everything around you is corrupted? The phrase I just quoted is the heart of Terrence Malick's movie A Hidden Life. The story of Franz Jägerstätter, an Austrian farmer who refuses to swear allegiance to Hitler, not out of political rebellion, not out of pride, but for something far more silent and radical, loyalty to what he feels is right, even at the cost of losing everything. 2000 years earlier, another man faced the same impossible choice. Socrates, standing before the tribunal of Athens, faces his death because, as he says, it is better to die than to betray what makes life worth living. In this video, we will follow these two paths, Franz and Socrates, to ask ourselves, what is justice? And more importantly, what does it mean to be just? Franz Jägerstätter is an Austrian farmer who lives with his wife Fanny and their 3 daughters in a mountain village during the so-called Anschluss, the annexation of Austria to the Nazi Germany. Their life is marked by simple actions, cultivating the land, taking care of animals, working together in the fields. It is a humble, simple existence, which Malick paints with wonderful, vibrant colors. His original shots allow us to see the simple, daily actions of the protagonist with a new eye.
You looked at me, and I knew.
The repeated actions of the various characters, which imitate the cyclical rhythm of nature, appear each time in a unique and unrepeatable way. The happy and simple life of the couple, in some ways excluded from the outside world, flows peacefully among the mountains, until their bubble suddenly bursts and historical events invade their world. When the time comes to swear allegiance to Hitler, Franz firmly refuses. He doesn't want, for example, to contribute with donations to finance the regime. And it is starting from this gesture that we witness the slow destruction of the world of the two lovers. You have to imagine that in a small village of farmers, everything depends on collaboration and trust towards each other. And when Franz refuses to finance the Nazi regime, others begin to see him first as a stranger and then even as an enemy. As a consequence, Franz and Fanny find themselves working alone, without any external help. The movie alternates intimate scenes, the glances between Franz and Fanny, the children's games, with the increasingly oppressive weight of the community that isolates them. Neighbors, friends, even the parish priest try to convince him to give up. Your death will serve no purpose, they tell him.
Your sacrifice would benefit no one.
If you think about it, it's the same logic that the world often imposes. It's better to adapt, better to survive. But Malick insists on a different idea. Nature, with its boundless fields and eternal mountains, seems to bear witness to this silent resistance, as if justice here were not something you see, but something you feel, an invisible bond with what is greater than us, something that, in the eyes of the two lovers, testifies the existence of God. Both are in fact religious, and the theme of faith actually persists throughout the film, showing us on the one hand the hypocrisy of the church, with its lack of the stance towards Nazism, and on the other the pure faith of Franz and Fanny, who, despite all the adversities, never stop praying and believing in salvation. There is a scene that emblematically represents the confrontation between these two types of faith. Franz doesn't want to go to war and explains his situation to the local parish priest, who tries to help him by talking to the bishop responsible for the region to obtain an exemption. Here we witness the impassive monologue of the bishop within the splendor of the church.
You have a duty to the fatherland. church tells you so.
The bishop simply explains to Franz that unfortunately nothing can be done, and he's forced to leave. At this point, the film takes a tragic turn. On one side we see Fanny, who finds herself alone, having to work twice as hard and take care of the 3 children, isolated and often hindered by other inhabitants. And on the other side, Franz, who the first day finds himself in military prison for refusing to give the Nazi salute in honor of Hitler. From this point, the plot degenerates, and we witness a real model of passive resistance that doesn't respond to violence except by praying for justice. Franz is moved from one prison to another until he's taken to the headquarters in Berlin, where he's tried before a military tribunal. The accusation is treason, and the sentence seems inevitable from the beginning. The film doesn't focus so much on the legal aspects of the trial as on the Franz's moral solitude. In front of the judges, he still offered a chance to save himself. All he would have to do is sign the oath of loyalty to Hitler, and his life would be spared. No one would ask him to really believe in what he's signing. No one would even investigate the sincerity of his act. But Franz refuses again, with the same calm that accompanied him from the beginning.
Do you have a right to do this?
Do I have a right not to?
The entire story that Malick presents to us is a true story based on the letters that the two lovers exchanged during their separation, and you can still read them today. And despite all the violence that both have to endure, their love never gives in and remains sweet and pure, even if only preserved in their letters. If this video and this topic resonates with you, consider joining our community on Patreon. You will get exclusive access to the behind-the-scenes content, conferences, and a closer look at the work we do here at the Empyrean Academy. Now that we have a clear idea of the plot, I would like to delve into some central themes related to justice. Throughout the movie, Franz, transported from one prison to another one, meets various characters who question his convictions. The interesting aspect is that not all of them oppose to him. In fact, it seems that some of them share his idea, or rather they know he's right, but they also believe it is useless and will lead to nothing but his death.
There's not much time. God doesn't care what you say, only what's in your heart. Say the oath and think what you like.
And here we could make the first important observation. The most dangerous form of evil within us comes from nihilism. Let me explain. The most alarming part of the evil within us is actually not its explicit form of violence, as slapped to a stranger, for example. Violence is vulgar because it derives either from stupidity or perversion. Malick shows us throughout the movie that violence was simply not enough to contribute to the phenomenon of Nazism. The real evil is hidden. It shows itself in fear, in the eyes of the one who looks away from violence, of one who refuses to face the truth, of one who is unable to believe in good, and this is nihilism. The guard who beats Franz in prison is just a violent wretch. The real murderers are those who talk to him, who understand him and know he's right, but who, despite this, do nothing to change either their situation or themselves. In fact, they are irritated by Franz's presence because they recognize his greatness and feel inferior. And here I want to connect another fundamental point. The reason Franz is superior is not because he wants to overthrow the regime as a hero. In fact, throughout the film, he remains passive and never commits an act of violence. This would in fact lower his moral figure. But on the other hand, Franz doesn't even want to become a martyr. He hopes indeed until the very end that he can be saved. And he has several possibilities to save himself. In fact, the various characters repeatedly invite him to give up, to sign an insignificant piece of paper, to go to war as a doctor if he preferred. But salvation requires a sacrifice that is too great. It requires the loss of what he believes in, and therefore of himself as a man. So why does Franz do what he does? Why does he end up dying? The reason is simply that he cannot do otherwise. He has no choice.
I have this feeling inside me that I can't do what I believe is wrong.
And here I'd like to bring another observation about moral freedom. It is a great Christian idea founded on the concept of free will. That is, God has given us free will so that we are free and can choose whether to side with good or evil. And it is a great idea if you think about it, which redeems man from all those previous fatalistic ideas and that tried to take away his responsibility as a man. But I don't think it's the deepest way to conceive of freedom. There is a third level, if you want to call it that way. Let's take as an example what Schelling writes in order to understand it. True freedom is harmony with the most sacred necessity. These reflections come from a text that is called The Essence of Human Freedom. And for a really long time I reflected on this text by Schelling without really understanding its meaning, until I saw the figure of Franz in this movie, the one who perfectly embodies this idea. So what does it actually mean? It means that we don't really have a choice in the face of good. And this is exactly why Franz cannot choose. He has too deeply understood the nature of good to be able to side with something that would corrupt it and insult it. Let me try to explain. The necessity we are talking about here is not a blind determinism, but as Schelling says, to put oneself in harmony with something sacred, that is secret, mysterious, which requires our commitment as a man. I mean, of course, Franz could have just chosen to become a Nazi, but can we really call this freedom? Making a choice doesn't mean being free. Deciding to lose our humanity, this is the absence of freedom. Malick shows Franz as a man who doesn't argue his decision with great moral theories. He simply states, I cannot do what I know is wrong. It is all here, a simplicity that, precisely for this reason, becomes abyssal. Perhaps the most powerful moment of the movie comes in the letters Franz writes from prison to his wife. There we understand that his decision is not moved by hatred or desperation, but by a form of inner peace. He writes, it doesn't matter what they do to me. What matters is what I do to myself. In this sentence is contained the ultimate meaning of his freedom. It is not external power that determines what we are, but inner fidelity to the truth that dwells within us. Franz's peace is born precisely from here, from having recognized that no pain, no violence, no imprisonment can deprive him of his dignity if he himself does not betray it. And Franz probably could have not done what he did if it were not for Fanny. The testimony of their simple yet strong love represents for us the concrete hope for a pure love. And pure not because it is ideal or fantastic, but because it is grounded on great ideas that mark the possibility of a sacred bond between two people. But it is in the final scene that Malick condenses the essence of their love and their shared destiny. Franz and Fanny see each other for the last time after a very long time that they've been apart. In front of them, the contract to sign, the concrete possibility of earthly salvation. A signature would have been enough, a simple gesture to return home. And yet, in that suspended moment, Franz turns to Fanny, looks her in the eyes, and asks her, "You understand me, don't you?" This moment is decisive. Franz needed not only his own conscience, but also Fanny's strength and understanding. Only thanks to her silent assent, can his decision be fully accomplished. And Fanny understands. The look she gives back to him is not of reproach or fear, but of a fidelity that even accepts the inevitable separation. In that mute gesture is condensed all the greatness of their love. Franz chooses death, but he doesn't do it alone. His choice is made possible by Fanny's love, which accompanies him to the last threshold.
Whatever comes,
It is almost if Malick were telling us that Franz's testimony belongs not only to him, but also to her, who supports him and makes him free to do what he must. Therefore, the last image of their meeting is not a farewell, but the revelation of a bond that overcomes even death. Their love then becomes the true victory over the regime, a hidden, invisible love to the world, but incorruptible, which is rooted in the fidelity to the good and to life. Many of the themes that Franz surprisingly embodies in the film A Hidden Life have their roots in the thought of the philosopher Plato, condensed in the figure of Socrates. So if the figure of Franz speaks to us of justice as a silent fidelity to the good, that of Socrates takes us back to its philosophical origins. The trial of Socrates in 399 BC takes place in Athens, still marked by political defeats and civil wounds. The Peloponnesian War, the brief regime of the 30 tyrants, and the restoration of democracy have made the city suspicious and nervous. On the stand, Socrates finds three names: Meletus, the formal young accuser, Anytus, the influential politician and craftsman, and Lycon, representative of the orators. The official charges are two: corrupting the youth and not believing in cities' gods, but rather introducing new ones. To understand what happens, we must look at the Athenian procedure and the way Socrates faces the trial. The right is popular. A jury of hundreds of citizens decides, listening to the arguments of the parties. Then, if the verdict is guilty, a second phase opens where the penalty is proposed. The thing is that Socrates doesn't defend himself as one would expect. He doesn't seek excuses. He does not try to please the jury. He doesn't present witness in his defense to save himself. On the contrary, he transforms the trial into a final great lesson. He explains his mission, namely the voice of the god, as a task to shed light on the ignorance of man, and uses his method of questioning to dismantle the commonplaces of the accusers. He actually demonstrates that many of the accusations are vague or inconsistent, but he does it with the same irreverence that has made him unpopular with many. This irritates the jury more than logic persuades it. In the end, Socrates is found guilty by a popular vote. When it comes to the penalty phase, he refuses to beg for mercy. Instead of proposing exile or silence, how one would expect from him, he mockingly suggests a small recognition as his punishment, even maintenance at the state's expenses. It is actually a gesture that highlights the absolute consistency of his behavior. He doesn't want to save himself by betraying the truth he has always preached. The death sentence is carried out with hemlock. Of course, Socrates, like many of his students suggest him, could have saved himself by adopting different strategy, but he refuses that compromise. His firmness is actually a part of the reason why the conviction seems so unjust. The city punishes him not so much for the serious crimes, but for not having wanted to bow to the social expectations. From the point of view of the substantive justice, that is, of consistency and moral intention, the trial is unjust because it punishes fidelity to truth more than real harm to the community. And this is the core of tragedy. A democracy that punishes critical conscience in the name of its own stability. Socrates is not a revolutionary with plots on the table. He is a man who questions and who cannot lie about what he considers true. For this reason, his conviction is less a sanction for a concrete crime and more an act of exclusion of one who exposes the vices of the city. Plato tells us that Socrates felt a demon, or like he calls him, daimon, within himself. An inner voice that never told him what to do, but only stopped him when he was about to do something wrong. And at the time of the trial, while Athens was unjustly accusing him, Socrates knows he's facing the most radical decision of his life. Yet he notices that this demon does not hold him back. This inner silence becomes for him the confirmation that he is walking in the right direction. He must not bow. He must not give up what he has always taught. It is precisely in this context that one of his most famous phrases resonates, one pronounced in the dialogue called Gorgias. It is better to suffer injustice than to commit it. Socrates means that the true wound is not the one inflicted on us from the outside, but the one we inflict on our own soul when we betray justice. Losing one's life is lesser evil compared to the losing one's moral integrity. Another dialogue of Plato, Phaedo, brings us to Socrates' last hours. His friends have found a way to make him escape. They have organized everything. Socrates could easily save himself, go into exile, continue to live, but he refuses. The point is that if he were to agree to escape, it would mean that all the words he has spoken until that moment were empty. It will be like admitting that justice is only worthwhile as long as it doesn't cost us too much. Instead, Socrates drinks the hemlock, not because he desires death, but because he wants to remain faithful until the end. So even if the court that condemned him was corrupt and unjust, he doesn't want to place himself above justice. No one is above. Even if human justice makes a mistake, the duty remains not to betray the higher justice that inhabits our soul. Here the parallel with Franz becomes evident. Both could have saved themselves. A signature would have been enough, and it would have been enough to escape. Both loved life, yet they chose to lose it. Not out of pride, not out of rebellion, but out of fidelity to something greater. So if Socrates calls this fidelity the care of the soul, Franz leaves it as a silent harmony with the good. But the logic is the same. One cannot betray what makes us human, even at the cost of death. Socrates and Franz are not heroes in the common sense of the term. They don't use swords, lead armies, or seek glory. They are men who loved life, people, and truth. It is precisely for this reason that they accepted losing it, because there is no life without justice, no love without fidelity, no freedom without truth. Their lesson is simple and terrible at the same time. What truly matters is not what we suffer from the outside, but what we choose to make of ourselves. Socrates says it with the voice of the philosopher. It is better to suffer injustice than to commit it. Franz repeats it, on the other hand, with the simplicity of a farmer. I cannot do what I know is wrong. Two voices, distant in time, yet united by the same truth. A truth that doesn't only concern the past, but that questions each of us today. Because we too, every day, find ourselves facing small and large choices. And the question always remains the same. Will I be able to remain just, even when everything around seems corrupt and unjust? Thank you for watching this video. I'm Ivan and this is Empyrean, the Academy of Philosophy and Fine Arts.